All right, guys. So today we're going to be talking about this task. Let's assume that we have a bunch of tickets in our backlog, right? Like that represent features, right? And they have different estimates, different uncertainties. Like some tickets are described better, some tickets are described like less in less quality way. And then some estimates are pretty accurate, some estimates are very raw, right? And we want to see how many of those features, how many of those tickets we can implement through the like with the given timeline and with the given teams, right? With the given resources. So that would be our goal. And we also want to play with different risks, right? Like we want to have like a lower risk, higher risk, and see how that plays out in our roadmap. So in order to do that, I'll be using the tool Deep Planner, and there is like a tool which is called a sample simulation, right, where we can just simulate the backlog one time and see and predict, the delivery just for the single backlog, right? So let's go ahead and click it. So company name, just let's say my company simulation, unit of measurement mandates. Um, So here is the list of epics that we have, the list of tickets, right? So each ticket, it has a high level estimate defined here. And what's also important is that besides the estimate that we can configure, we can change, and we can include more items with different activity types. We also have a so-called estimate uncertainty, right? Which basically defines how good this estimate, how accurate this estimate is, right? Like how good the requirements were that this estimate is based upon, right? So let's say if we have a bad requirements and like let's say it's like just line of text that defines the scope of the ticket, then we can say that the uncertainty of this ticket is very high, right? Like we could say 90%, 80%. And then if the uncertainty is low, we can say, okay, 10% or 20%. But this is where a lot of details of the ticket are defined, like user interface, specific business details about the ticket, maybe behavior things, right? So usually it's like somewhere in the middle, like 50, 60% for a very like high level, for a ticket with high level requirements defined, right? So we can see, like once we define the estimate and the certainty, that these factors that will be very, like they will affect a lot our roadmap when we also apply risks to the delivery dates, right? So besides that, you may wanna just order these tickets by priority, right? So you may just set one ticket more prioritized over another one. And this will also define the sequence of the tickets, like how we want them to be delivered in which sequence, right? So that the engine gets a proper picture of, like our preference, right? Uh, so let's click next. So here's we define some teams, right? So each team represents certain people that participate in our development, right? For example, in this case, it's like developer, tester, business analyst. Oops. So each of those members, they can have their own daily capacity, right? And this is what will affect the timeline too, right? Like we want to make sure we have enough resources for particular epics to execute. And so basically we need to define those resources exactly like we anticipate them to be in our schedule, right? And we also can define more teams and add more resources if necessary, like more team members if we think that like we need more and we need more people participating in the execution of our schedule, right? So let's click next. Okay, and the last step is basically we define the boundaries of our roadmap, right? Like, for example, we want to plan it for the quarter or we want to plan it for a year, right? That will define the time boundaries for the simulation, right? So usually there is a constraint based on time, based on specific milestone, and based on specific goal, right? Like, for example, there is demo event or some other event. We want to account for it here on that screen on that step. So, and then we click generate. All right, so the system now generated the roadmap to us. We can observe the epics here and see like when this epics will be delivered approximately, right? This is the time which accounts for for estimates, teams, and dependencies between epics, right? So these arrows, as you can see, those are the dependencies that also create a boundary for the scheduler, right? So to schedule these epics, like all the epics were successfully scheduled, as we can see, and we can actually look up each individual epic and see who was assigned to this epic in particular, right? Like which people were assigned. And in the full version of this editor, we can actually select like specific people we want to prioritize for this epic, right? We can play with the preference for epic like teams or for specific people. And in this way, we can control maybe the best people for this ticket, right? But here we can see that the system basically allocated this ticket for a particular team and for the team members of this team. And here we can actually play with the risk, right? So what you can do is you can actually like either lower risk appetite or make a high risk appetite. And when you make the change, the system will adjust the buffer, or it will decrease the time, the delivery calendar time of the epics based on your selection. For example, if you select the super low risk, the system basically increases the chance as the buffer to the ticket so that the risk is minimized, right? Based on your selection, like of the lower risk. But if I select the super high risk, so this is where the system will shrink the epics and they will use the more risky expectations, but at the same time, delivery of these tickets can be expected earlier, right? And we can actually control it by individual epic in the full version of the editor, so that, for example, you have a roadmap and a time box with specific risk like selection. But if you want a specific epic or a specific team working on this epic to have like a low risk to high risk, you can adjust it based just on that specific epic, right? So the calendar days will adjust automatically, and you can basically play with that. You can play with estimates, with different with teams, resources that are assigned, right? In this way, you can control how many epics you want to deliver, like which epics and which risk you want to take to complete that milestone, like or quarter. Well, that's basically it for today. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments to this video.